On Wednesday, hundreds of thousands of protesters took to the streets across Chile after President Piñera begged for forgiveness and announced a series of social reforms in order to calm the protests without lifting the curfew he announced only days earlier.
Dockers, miners, teachers, and healthcare workers, as well as high school and university students, began a general strike that culminated in mass protests in the country's largest cities. Night after night, thousands took the streets to defy the curfew and the increased militarization of major cities, even as they faced brutal repression, with many being murdered, disappeared, or injured. Nevertheless, the call of "Out Piñera" can be heard from north to south.
In this video, we're going to explain the circumstances that unleashed the fury of the entire population of Chile and the importance this uprising has for all of Latin America.
The people of Chile don't want to live like this anymore. The economic promise of the success of neoliberalism has been realized only by a privileged few, who are able to enjoy the best there is in education and healthcare, while all others have to suffer on in poverty, despair, and oppression.
The vast majority of Chile's population lives on very low salaries that can't compete with the high cost of living. Chile's public services have been privatized since Pinochet's dictatorship, and this has remained unchanged ever since. What this means is that the public education that is available is of a very low quality. People can't afford to go to university, or they're saddled with debt for decades. Healthcare is expensive and inaccessible. People die waiting for treatment, and others have to pay exorbitant amounts of money when they are sick, even if they have insurance.
The neoliberal project of Chile has led to a general precariousness of labor, because all of the labor reforms put in place before the dictatorship were erased under Pinochet's rule. Since then, the so-called democratic governments that came afterwards did not reinstate them. Most workers spend their lives toiling away at exhausting work days with short breaks, if any.
There are also high levels of work-related illnesses and injuries. When workers are actually able to retire, they're offered pensions at only 30% of their original wage. Meanwhile, insurance companies make a huge profit selling pension plans to workers. The bosses prosper as the workers starve. And when the working class rises up in opposition, the ruling class just offers them crumbs. This is the reality of neoliberalism.
That is why, even though the rebellion started with high school students protesting a subway fare increase, one of the main slogans of the movement is, "It is not 30 pesos, it is 30 years." Meaning that this protest is not about a 30 peso subway fare increase, but about 30 years of neoliberalism that have thrown the country into crisis.
Piñera revoked the increase and announced an expansive set of social reforms, including cutting government officials' salaries and raising the minimum wage. But it was clear to the people of Chile, as it should be clear to us, that these are only crumbs. In the face of these concessions, the people have stayed in the streets. Various parties within the government have called for a dialogue with protesters to stop the mobilizations. Even the center-left Communist Party and the neo-reformist Frente Amplio support institutional solutions to the class conflict, which will pose no threat to the ruling class's power.
There's an illusion that the return of the so-called pink tide governments can fix the situation. But their promises are as empty as any other bourgeois governments. The mobilizations of the masses on the streets has shown that it is possible for the poor and working class of Chile to impose their demands on the ruling class, beginning with the resignation of Piñera and an end to martial law.
We, as Left Voice, stand with our sister organization, the Partido de Trabajadores Revolucionarios, in calling for a free and sovereign constituent assembly. The only way to alleviate the neoliberal crisis is through the coordinated actions, politics, and program of the working class. We can't trust the people who have maintained imperialist domination in Latin America to save us. This is our moment, the moment to trust the working class and its allies, to make a change in the country, in the continent, in the world.